I found one sealed chamber beneath the floor, and it held a lost picture.
She was 20 and homeless. No room, no family, no safe address. Just one dented film reel and 117.43 she had earned cleaning projection booths after midnight. And with that money, she bought a silent film studio lot abandoned in Los Angeles County, California since 1934 when its name vanished from production maps. 3 western facades leaned toward the road. The main lighting tower had split at its base. The county condemned the lot on October 14, 2022, with demolition planned for the following summer. Yet beneath the nitrate vault floor lay a sealed editing chamber, unopened for 88 years, holding one lost picture and enough money to alter every choice she had left. Before we continue, if stories like this mean something to you, hit subscribe and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. Maya Ellison had been cutting things together her whole life without knowing it. As a child, she joined scraps because whole things rarely lasted. Ticket stubs became bookmarks, grocery sacks became envelopes. On borrowed televisions, she studied how a lifted hand could answer a door closing 3 scenes earlier. By 12, she knew order could make pain bearable. Her mother disappeared into county records when Maya was 6, leaving only a washed-out pharmacy photograph. Then came temporary rooms, intake desks, and adults who called silence adjusting well. Maya kept precious things flat, dry, and easy to carry. At 14, she met Elias Vale in the Rialto Annex projection room where students swept after weekend matinees. Elias was 73, narrow as a folded tripod with a white scar crossing his left thumb. He had spent 40 years rescuing damaged film. On Saturdays, Maya climbed the iron stairs before sunrise into the smell of cold velvet and machine oil. He taught her to inspect perforations under a loop scrape emulsion with a razor's back brush on film cement and hold the joint under glass until the solvent flashed away. Nitrate stayed in a vented can far from lamps and damp fingers. At noon, they ate oranges over the sink. Every cut must earn the darkness around it, Elias told her. He meant that removing a frame was not destruction if the story could breathe afterward. Maya carried the sentence into every room where silence was used as punishment. Elias died during a wet February when she was 17. His niece cleared the booth before Maya heard. The rewind splicer ledger and cedar boxes were sold with the old seats. One dented reel remained beneath a radiator marked with a grease pencil M. Maya took it because no one else knew it existed. The Van Nuys foster home belonged to Warren and Celia Braddock with beige carpets, locked pantry shelves, and a clock chiming each quarter hour. Warren never shouted. He lowered his voice until every word demanded attention. Celia measured groceries on blue cards and opened Maya's mail with a silver knife. They called film a fixation, then a sickness. Twice Warren carried her cans toward the incinerator. Twice Maya blocked the doorway until he set them down. On March 3, 2023, Maya returned from a cleaning shift and found the dented reel on the kitchen table beside a ceramic ashtray. A curl of blackened film lay in it, still giving off the bittersweet odor Elias had warned her meant danger. Warren held the front door open. Celia stood by the sink drying the same white cup again and again, her eyes fixed on the towel. "Take your reel and leave before morning, Maya." 8 words. Warren had chosen them carefully. Maya slid the reel into her coat, lifted her canvas bag, and waited for Celia to turn. The cup squeaked beneath the towel. No face lifted, no hand stopped moving. At 11:42 p.m., Maya stepped onto Satakoy Street carrying 2 shirts, a toothbrush, Elias's loop, and 117.43s in folded bills and coins. For 6 weeks, Los Angeles became a sequence of places that closed. In North Hollywood, she slept behind a laundromat dryer vent, waking when the metal cooled. In Burbank, she sat upright in a bus shelter with her bag through both arms. Downtown, she learned which Union Station benches drew guards and which Olvera Street stairwell stayed dry until 5. In Glendale, she paid $14 for one hostel bunk. Her money fell by exact degrees: $91 after transit and bread, $68 after replacing a torn shoe, $43 after soup and a bandage. At 26, she stopped buying coffee. At 19, she walked from Echo Park to Hollywood. She washed in library restrooms, dried socks beneath hand blowers, and kept the reel wrapped in cotton against sudden heat. At night, she listened for footsteps and counted sprocket holes through the can. In the 6th week, April wind pushed grit beneath doors. Maya entered the Francis Howard Goldwyn Hollywood Regional Library because it opened early and asked nothing. Beside old zoning notices, she found a county surplus bulletin folded inside a newspaper. One listing was boxed in red. Silent picture lot, 4.8 acres. Structures unsafe. Nitrate storage vault sealed. Cash transfer $100. Buyer accepts remediation and demolition liability. The address lay beyond Laurel Canyon on a forgotten service road above Studio City. A clerk's number was printed below it along with an inspection deadline 3 days away. Maya read the notice 4 times, then she counted her money beneath the table, $103.18. The bus would take most of what remained after the purchase, and food would have to become a later problem. She copied the address onto Elias's old edge-code card, returned the bulletin to the shelf, and walked toward the county office before caution could rearrange the scene. By sunset, she had paid for a seat heading north through the basin with the dented reel upright between her shoes and a condemned studio lot waiting beyond the last paved turn. The bus left Maya at the Chatsworth Depot shortly after noon, where heat shimmered above the rails and the driver pointed west with 2 fingers. The county office lay 3.6 miles away, the property another 8.1 beyond that. Maya walked because the fare in her pocket had become food. By dusk, the clerk's office had closed. Near Santa Susana Pass, she found an open hay barn behind a boarding stable and made a hollow between 2 bales. The temperature fell to 46 degrees. Hay dust settled inside her sleeves, and each time a horse shifted, the rafters answered with a patient wooden knock. Morning brought alfalfa and diesel. Maya entered Chatsworth along Devonshire Street, passing Sierra Camera Repair, Mendez Family Bakery, Gable Feed Intact, the Copper Kettle Cafe, and Halpern's Hardware. She bought 1-day-old roll for 30 cents and carried it unwrapped. The county field records office occupied a low stucco building behind the courthouse annex. Its lobby held metal chairs, a dragging wall clock, and parcel maps bound in gray cloth. At the counter sat a woman with a silver braid coiled at her neck. Her brass nameplate read MRS Evelyn Harrow Deeds and Surplus Transfers. Maya placed the bulletin and $100 beneath the glass. Mrs. Harrow studied her coat canvas bag and dented reel, then drew out a folder. You understand the structures are condemned? Yes, ma'am. You understand the nitrate vault may be contaminated? Yes, ma'am. You understand the county provides no utilities? Yes, ma'am. You understand demolition liability becomes yours today? Yes, ma'am. The clerk turned the forms around, marked 3 signature lines with a blunt pencil, and watched Maya write Maya Ruth Ellison in careful block letters. At the surname, Mrs. Harrow stopped the brass date stamp halfway down. Ellison, she said, were you connected to Elias Vale? The question entered more quietly than the clock. I taught me film repair. Mrs. Harrow opened the oldest folder and unfolded a thin page. In 1967, Elias had filed a preservation objection against demolition of this lot. He listed its last caretaker as Ruth Ellison, negative cutter, presumed dead. For 11 years, he renewed the objection, paying every recording fee himself. Afterward, the parcel remained frozen in surplus inventory, too hazardous for an ordinary sale and too disputed to clear without public notice. He came every April, Mrs. Harrow said. Told me Ruth Ellison once saved a picture by cutting burning frames away with garden shears. Maya had never heard the name, yet Ruth was her middle name, chosen by a mother who had left no explanation. Mrs. Harrow lowered the stamp. Its brass head struck the deed with a dry, exact sound. She slid over the document 1 key and a hand-drawn route. Take Devonshire West, then Topanga Canyon. Turn onto Santa Susana Pass Road. After the old tunnel marker, follow Iverson Lane 9/10 of a mile. The gate is beyond the second dry wash. A bus carried Maya only as far as Topanga Canyon Boulevard. From there she walked uphill beneath a white sky. Cars thinned. Sandstone rose in tilted shelves, and scrub oak gave way to pepper trees blackened by old fires. Near Iverson Lane, a man in a straw hat repaired wire fence beside a red mailbox marked Ortega. His square-headed brown dog, White, on one paw, watched without barking. You headed for the picture place? Maya nodded. Gate drags. Lift while you push. The dog followed her 20 yards before the man clicked his tongue. Beyond them, 3 walnut trees leaned over the road, their leaves showing pale undersides to the wind. The gate dragged exactly as promised. Maya lifted until its bottom hinge cleared the sand, then pushed with her shoulder. The lot spread across 4.8 acres of dry grass and broken scenery. 3 false fronts stood in a row, a bank, a hotel, and a chapel, each supported by naked braces. The editing house measured about 30 by 50 feet redwood over riverstone piers. Half its tar paper roof had peeled back. A brick chimney rose at the east wall, missing 2 courses at the crown. Above the porch, a faded sign still held 4 readable words. Ellison and Vale Picture Works. Wind tapped it against its chains. The key opened the editing house after 3 attempts. The door dragged over grit, releasing air that smelled of hot wood mouse nests and the medicinal sweetness of old cement. Sunlight entered through the roof and lay across the floor like a projection beam. In the front room, her boots disturbed gray powder and curled leader. A warped counter ran beneath empty reel pegs. Dust clung oily between her fingers. Somewhere inside the wall, a lizard scratched once and stopped. The back room was cooler. A hand-cranked rewind bench stood beneath boarded windows, its iron arms furred with rust. Maya turned 1 spindle. A low metallic note traveled through the room, bringing Elias's booth back for 1 breath. Orange peel in the sink glass plates beneath his palms, the soft snap of a splice being tested. She released the spindle. Behind the house, the nitrate vault crouched apart from every other structure, a concrete rectangle sunk halfway into the slope. Its steel door was sealed with a county bar and 2 chains. From 20 feet away came mineral damp and something sharper. Maya did not approach. At sunset, she softened the hard roll with water from a rust-stained pump and ate slowly. Wind moved through the clapboards, carrying the dry rattle of walnut leaves. From the floor, the false storefronts framed pieces of sky where roofs should have been. Maya folded her coat beneath her head and placed the dented reel against her chest. The boards were cold through her shirt. A loose sign outside knocked twice, paused, then knocked again. She listened until the rhythm became ordinary. The film had been waiting for her. At first light, Maya tested the pump again. The handle groaned through 9 strokes before brown water coughed into the basin, followed by a thin, clear stream cold enough to ache against her fingers. She filled 2 film cans, let the sediment settle, and boiled what she intended to drink. The outhouse stood behind the false chapel, tilted but usable after she replaced 1 hinge with baling wire. During the next 3 days, she learned the editing house by sound. The plank beside the door gave 1 dry complaint. The board below the rewind bench clicked twice. Near the back wall, 3 boards remained silent, even beneath her full weight. She marked each dependable step with chalk. On the 4th morning, she walked back to Halpern's Hardware with a list written on leader paper. The store smelled of pine handles, fertilizer, and the faint iron scent of loose nails. Its owner, Samuel Halpern, wore magnifying spectacles that made one eye appear larger than the other. He read Maya's list without interrupting, then looked at the county deed she placed beside it. "I have $11.18. That will not roof a birdhouse. I can work off the rest." Mr. Halpern pushed his spectacles up with one knuckle. "What kind of work?" "Cleaning, inventory, film repair if you have any." He opened a ledger whose pages had softened at the corners. 30-day account, no interest. You miss the date, you come tell me before I come asking." "I will." He wrote Ellison Picture Lot across the top, then priced only what she could carry: a 12-ounce claw hammer for $4.75, a wire chimney brush for $3.20, 50 feet of sash cord for $2.10, a gallon of kerosene for $1.65, and a canvas dust mask for 85 cents. Before closing the account, he added a stained booklet titled "Repairs for the Rural Home." "That one is free," he said. "It has already survived 3 owners." Maya spent that afternoon on the chimney. She tied the round wire brush to sash cord, weighted the lower end with a rusted coupling, and climbed the exterior ladder 1 rung at a time. At the crown, she covered her mouth and worked the brush downward in short strokes, turning it a quarter turn whenever it caught. The first pass brought flakes. The second released a black column of creosote that struck the firebox like dry gravel. On the third, a bird's nest dropped intact, woven with horsehair cigarette paper and 1 strip of perforated film. She worked for 6 hours, scraping the smoke shelf with a bent putty knife and carrying soot outside in an enamel bowl. Near dusk, she held a mirror inside the firebox. A pale square of sky appeared at the flue's top. The first fire began with walnut twigs, 2 cedar shingles, too rotten for repair, and a page torn from an outdated county auction circular. Maya kept the flame small for 20 minutes, watching every joint. Smoke rose cleanly. No gray ribbon entered the room. She heated pump water in a dented saucepan left beneath the counter and cooked oats with the last half of her bakery roll crumbled into them. The meal tasted of smoke and iron. She ate beside the hearth while warmth entered the floorboards by degrees. The next morning, she opened the workroom shutters. What she had taken for an empty rear chamber was an editing room preserved beneath dirt. 2 paired rewinds occupied the long bench. A cast iron splicer sat under a hardened brush in a jar. There were 3 glass inspection plates, a footage counter with brass number wheels, a rack of wooden cores, a hand punch for repairing torn perforations, and a cabinet whose shallow drawers were labeled "Leader Cement Patches" and "Rejects." A viewing box remained against the north wall. Its ground glass screen had cracked diagonally, but the handwheel still moved an internal shutter. Maya cleaned the gears with kerosene and turned it slowly. Inside, a strip of brittle film advanced 1 frame at a time, a woman in a dark dress standing beside a painted train. The woman lifted 1 hand. Then the strip ended. Maya removed it without bending the curl. The edge marks dated it to the early 1920s. Along the final frame, someone had made a grease pencil slash identical to the M on her dented reel. She set both pieces beneath glass. The silent boards near the back wall began to trouble her. Every surrounding plank answered when tapped with the hammer handle, but those 3 produced a low, shortened sound. Maya laid the footage counter across them as a straight edge. The center board sat 1/8 of an inch higher. She pressed it. Nothing moved. She placed the kerosene can on one end, then the hammer saucepan and 2 stones. The board did not flex under nearly 30 pounds. It was not supported like the others. At the wall, a round cedar disc had been fitted into the baseboard, its grain aligned so carefully that dirt had hidden the seam. A tiny perforation pattern circled its edge. Maya inserted Elias's loop handle into the center hole and turned counterclockwise. The disc released with a soft wooden breath. Behind it lay a square iron spindle. She fitted the rewind crank over it and pulled. Beneath the raised floorboards, old gears resisted, then moved. The 3 silent planks lifted together less than an inch. Maya stopped. She swept every grain of dirt from the seam before raising them farther. A shallow chamber occupied the space between stone piers. Cedar paper lined its sides. Inside were 5 parcels tied with waxed thread and 1 narrow tin box. She opened the smallest parcel first. It held Elias's scarred splicing knife, its ebony handle worn pale where his thumb had rested. Beside it lay a bottle of film cement sealed in wax, 2 camel hair brushes, and a brass registration pin wrapped in cotton. The second package contained a hand-cranked viewer no larger than a lunch tin. The third held 10 short rolls of unexposed safety stock, each dated 1951 and packed with desiccant. In the fourth, she found trimming shears, a perforation gauge, and a bone folder engraved Ruth Ellison. Maya held the folder until the letters warmed beneath her fingers. The fifth parcel was heavier. Inside, wrapped in black paper and sealed in separate metal cans, lay nitrate film. Each can had ventilation holes and a handwritten title. The Last Light of Morning, assembled negative, do not project only copy. The handwriting was narrow and right slanted. The title meant nothing to Maya, though the careful warning did. She carried the cans outside one at a time and placed them in shade 20 feet apart. Nitrate could ignite from heat, friction, or decay. Once burning, it supplied part of its own oxygen. She did not open them. Only then did she lift the tin box. Its lid had been soldered and later cut free along 3 edges. Inside were cloth bags, bank straps, a sealed envelope, and a military medal darkened almost black. The ribbon had faded to brown. On its rim was engraved D. Ellison, 1918. Maya placed the medal beside the letter and counted the money on the cleanest inspection plate. There were $20 gold pieces wrapped in chamois, Morgan silver dollars dated between 1881 and 1902, $5 half eagles and rolls of silver half dollars. Beneath them lay banknotes bundled in hundreds and thousands, some old enough to carry unfamiliar seals. She counted once, then again by denomination, recording each subtotal on the back of the auction bulletin. The exact amount was 150,037. She did not touch the envelope. By the time she finished, night had entered the room and the fire had fallen to red seams. Maya returned the money to the tin box, wrapped the metal separately, and carried the unopened letter in her coat. Beyond the false chapel, an old concrete reservoir occupied the lowest part of the lot. Winter rain had gathered there beneath reeds and floating leaves. Maya sat on its bank while moonlight trembled across the surface whenever the wind crossed it. Behind her, the studio facade stood without roofs, built to appear complete from only one direction. The water did not pretend. It held the moon, broken, joined, and broken again. The film had been waiting for her. Morning found Maya at the inspection bench before the sun cleared the sandstone ridge. She set the envelope beneath the north window and recognized the narrow rightward slant from the film cans. The capital E matched Elias's old repair labels, but the smaller letters belonged to another hand, steadier, more deliberate, and marked by the same long tail beneath the name Ellison. She opened the flap with the bone folder. My dear one, whoever you are. If you have found this, then the floor kept its promise longer than I expected. My name is Ruth Adelaide Ellison. Dr. Miriam Lowe of Good Samaritan Hospital in Los Angeles has told me the pain in my hands is caused by metastatic bone cancer. She believes I have months, perhaps less, and so I am leaving instructions where only a careful worker will discover them. Our trade began with my grandfather, Amos Ellison, born in 1849 in Lowell, Massachusetts, who repaired magic lantern slides before coming west in 1887. His daughter, Clara Ellison, born in 1874 in Pasadena, learned to tint glass and number scenes by hand. I was born in 1898 in Los Angeles and entered the cutting room at 15. My daughter, Margaret Ruth Ellison, born in 1921 in Glendale, could judge a damaged splice by sound before she could read the edge code. 4 generations worked by lamplight, removing what was burned so the surviving pictures could move. The trade closed on September 17, 1956. After that came more than 30 years of silence. The producers changed formats, the buildings emptied, and people decided work done by women at benches had never required skill. Margaret left after my husband, Daniel Ellison, died from wounds received in France during the First World War. My son served later in the Pacific and returned unable to enter a dark theater. I do not blame either of them for choosing daylight. If the nitrate reels remain sound, keep them below 70 degrees Fahrenheit and below 40% humidity. Never open a can that smells sharply of vinegar or shows amber powder. For cement splices, scrape only the emulsion side, overlap 4 perforations, apply 1 thin brush of solvent, and hold beneath glass for 30 seconds. When making a preservation copy, leave 8 feet of leader at each end and inspect every 100 feet for shrinkage. A join should bend without whitening. If it whitens, cut it again. The money came from pictures saved before studio fires, from wages never claimed, and from work done under other people's names. Use it to keep the roof sound, the vault cool, and your hands free from hurry. Inheritance is not the object passed down. It is the work someone prepared so another person could continue without beginning alone. Elias Vale promised to watch the property after I could not. If he has gone before you arrive, forgive him nothing. He kept faith longer than anyone asked. The house is not empty. It has been waiting. You are welcome here. Ruth Adelaide Ellison, April 6, 1982. Maya read the letter twice. The second reading was slower. At the line naming Margaret, she placed 2 fingers over the date and held them there until the paper stopped trembling. Then she folded the sheets along their original creases, pressing each edge with the bone folder exactly as Ruth might have done. A final sentence had been written across the envelope's back. Beneath the rear door stone, Daniel left his mark. Maya crossed the workroom, unlatched the swollen back door, and forced it open with her shoulder. Outside, the earth remained cool beneath the morning crust. She cleared weeds from the threshold and found a sandstone slab set lower than the others. Its edge carried a shallow carving, 2 joined strips of film crossed like an open pair of shears. Maya loosened the soil with the claw hammer and lifted one corner. Beneath it lay no money, only a brass marker darkened green. Daniel Ellison, cutter cameraman husband, had been engraved across its face. Below the words was a date in 1919 in a single line. The missing frame still belongs to the picture. She cleaned the marker with water in the corner of her sleeve, then returned it to the light beside the door. Inside, Maya selected Elias's old inspection viewer from the cedar chamber. She cleaned its lamp cup, trimmed the blackened wick to 1/8 of an inch, and filled it with a spoonful of kerosene. When she struck the match, the flame leaned toward the glass chimney, then steadied into a small amber eye. She threaded the brief strip, showing the woman beside the painted train. The woman lifted her hand again. This time, Maya turned the crank 1 frame at a time. Behind the woman, nearly lost in painted steam, stood a younger figure holding a slate. 3 letters had been chalked at its edge, R-A-E. Maya stopped with the frame illuminated. Nothing in the room changed, yet nothing was vacant now. The worn bench, the labels, the sealed cans, and the marker outside had become parts of one continuous act of care, not grand care, exact care. It had reached her through people who did not know the whole story. Mrs. Harrow had kept Elias's filings instead of sending them to storage. Mr. Ortega had warned her about the gate and allowed his dog to walk beside her without calling it back too quickly. Samuel Halpern had opened a ledger for a stranger with $11. The woman at Mendez Family Bakery had chosen the least stale roll and charged Maya 30 cents instead of 50. Even the bus driver had waited while Maya lifted the dented reel from beneath her seat. Before we go farther, think of one small kindness someone once gave you when they had no reason to know how badly you needed it. Tell us about that person in the comments if you can. Quiet help often travels farther than the giver ever sees. That evening, Maya returned the nitrate cans to separate shaded places and carried the heirloom tools inside. She arranged the splicing knife, bone folder, registration pin, and loop on a folded cloth beside her blanket. The letter remained beneath the inspection glass. She slept facing the bench with Elias's viewer extinguished near her hand and Ruth's tools close enough to touch in the dark. The first snow came on December soon and left 3.4 inches across the false streets, whitening the hotel facade and filling the open bank doorway. Water found the editing room ceiling before noon. Maya set saucepan lids beneath 3 leaks and read the roofing chapter in repairs for the rural home 3 times, once for sequence, once for measurements, and once for mistakes. The roof was 32 by 52 feet with a 6 and 12 pitch. Allowing 10% for waste, she calculated 21 squares of cedar shingles, 6 rolls of 30-pound felt, and 25 pounds of hot-dip nails. Samuel Halpern checked her figures, removed 1 square from the order, then gave it back after studying the broken western edge. From beneath his counter, he brought out a roofing hatchet with a notched blade. My brother used this until his knees quit. A former roofer named Walter Pike arrived the next morning. He was 71, with tar permanently darkening the lines of his palms. When Maya offered to deduct his work from the hidden money, he closed her fingers over the bills. Pay me by finishing it. They sistered the split rafter with 2 16-foot Douglas fir boards bolted through the old timber at 16-inch intervals. Walter snapped a chalk line across the felt and taught her to set each nail with 3 strokes, 1 to start it, 1 to seat it, 1 to make it flush. On the 6th day, he touched a raised head. That nail's proud. Maya reached for the hatchet. Pull it! They worked 11 days, through frost and thin afternoon sun. Maya learned to keep the shingle gaps staggered and the grain facing downward. On December 14th, Walter fitted the final ridge cap. That night, rain passed over the lot and no saucepan was needed. January exposed what the first fire had hidden. 3 bricks above the smoke chamber had spalled so badly their faces came away beneath Maya's thumb. The mortar between them had become pale powder, soft enough to brush from the joints. She removed each loose brick by hand, numbered it in chalk, and soaked the sound replacements before setting them. Walter advised against hard Portland cement against old masonry. Samuel mixed her a dry blend of 3 parts hydraulic lime to 1 part fire clay, enough to tolerate heat without trapping moisture. For 3 weeks, daytime temperatures remained between 22 and 29 degrees Fahrenheit. Maya kept the mortar beneath a wool blanket near the hearth and warmed small batches before carrying them outside. She worked barehanded because gloves dulled the pressure of the jointing tool. Every 15 minutes, her fingers went numb. She stopped, held them near the stove without touching the iron, and returned when she could feel the brick edges again. She rebuilt the damaged courses, packed the smoke shelf joint, and shaped the crown so rain would run away from the flue. The new mortar cured beneath damp burlap, protected at night by an overturned wooden crate. On January 29th, Maya lit a test fire with dry walnut and one sheet of newsprint. The flame leaned inward. Smoke entered the throat, rose without hesitation, and drew clean above the repaired crown. She stood outside until the final blue thread disappeared. Beneath the dirt, the editing house floor was white pine fastened with hand-cut rosehead nails. Some boards carried stains from spilled cement. Others had darkened where generations of shoes had turned between the rewinds and inspection bench. Maya rented a random orbit sander from Halpern's for $14 per day. Samuel made her sign beneath a penciled warning, "No nail heads above wood." She countersank every raised nail with a narrow punch, then sanded the rooms in 3 passes, 80 grit to remove grime and old wax, 120 to soften the scratches, and 220 for the final surface. Dust entered her hair cuffs and teeth. Each evening she vacuumed the floor twice and wiped it with clean cotton until the cloth came away pale. The first coat of oil disappeared almost immediately. The second remained wet for 20 minutes. After the third, she closed the building for a 48-hour cure and slept in the false chapel beneath a tarpaulin. The boards changed from dark honey toward mahogany, though no stain had been added. Old traffic paths remained visible beneath the sheen, especially before the viewing box where Ruth and Elias must have stood thousands of times. One morning, Maya carried the sander to the porch and could not bring herself to start it. At the reservoir, a great blue heron stood in 6 inches of water, its reflection longer than its body. For nearly an hour it did not move. Then its head struck, the wings opened, and the bird lifted over the false rooftops. Maya watched until it crossed the ridge. She did no work that day. The editing house had 8 windows. 3 had no glass at all. 4 were cracked from sash to sash. The 8th held one original pane, thin and faintly green, marked 1788, in a corner where the glassmaker's diamond had scratched the date. Maya preserved it exactly as found. She removed the damaged panes, labeled every sash, and scraped the old putty without levering against the wood. New glass rested on a thin bed of DAP 33. She pressed glazier's points at 8-inch intervals, then rolled the putty into warm ropes and drew the knife in one continuous angle, leaving the inside edge just below the sight line. The sash cords had rotted inside their pockets. Maya replaced them with 1/4-inch cotton line, feeding each length over the pulley and tying a figure-8 knot at the counterweight. The weights descended with a soft iron knock. For the first time, the windows stayed where she raised them. On the original panes, she used no fresh compound until the surrounding wood had been consolidated. The wavering glass bent the outdoor scenery, making the false chapel appear to breathe when wind moved the branches. By the final window, February light had become almost gentle. Maya seated the last point and looked up as a chickadee landed on a walnut branch outside, its black cap tilted toward the blade in her hand. She waited until it flew before drawing the final line of putty. The wall beside the chimney still carried horsehair plaster over hand-split oak lath. Maya's first patch slid before noon. The second cracked around the edges. The third dried with a hollow center that sounded beneath her knuckle. Samuel Halpern found an old burlap bag in his loft filled with horsehair saved from his brother's upholstery shop. Maya washed it in warm water, cut it into short fibers, and folded it into lime plaster until the mix held together without clumping. She pressed a scored scratch coat between the laths, waited until it resisted a thumbprint, then added a 3/8-inch brown coat. For 72 hours, she misted it morning and evening. The final coat was 1/8 of an inch thick, drawn smooth with a steel trowel and softened at the edges with a damp brush. When the surface had dried to the same pale gray as the old wall, Maya rested her palm against it. These patches will hold another 100 years. Doris Bell, who owned the Copper Kettle Cafe, began leaving paper bags on the editing house step before sunrise. She wore red-framed glasses and tied each bag with white cotton string. Inside were heel slices, boiled eggs, or yesterday's biscuits wrapped in wax paper. Maya carried the first bag back to the cafe with $2. Doris pushed the money across the counter without looking up from the register. "Pay me in candles when the shop reopens." Maya had never mentioned reopening. She folded the bills and placed them in the flour tin beside the hearth. Caleb Ortega arrived on a blue Schwinn during the first clear afternoon in March. He was 16, all elbows and careful manners, with a splitting maul balanced across his handlebars. Without asking, he began dividing storm-fallen walnut behind the false chapel. When Maya offered him wages, Caleb set one boot on the bicycle pedal and shook his head. "My mother said, about your grandfather." Maya did not correct him. She sharpened the maul instead and showed him how to follow the grain rather than strike the center. By dusk, they had stacked enough wood for another month. Reverend Boyd walked Iverson Lane each morning in a charcoal coat polished thin at the elbows. He never entered the property. He tipped his hat at the gate and paused long enough to notice what had changed. After the chimney began drawing cleanly, he stood beneath the walnut trees, lifted 2 fingers and said, "Keep these hands steady." Then he continued toward town. Maya postponed the cellar until February 11th, when the roof, chimney, and windows could be trusted without supervision. The door beneath the rear stairs opened onto 7 granite steps, each worn shallow at the center. Below them lay a 12 by 15-foot fieldstone floor. Moisture darkened the joints, but no standing water remained. At the center was one dressed granite slab set more precisely than the surrounding stones. Its surface bore the same crossed film mark carved beside Daniel's marker. Maya tested the edges with the bone folder and found no loose seam. She did not lift it. Under the third step, her fingers touched an oak box wedged behind a fallen chip of granite. Its lid opened without a lock. Inside lay a brass key whose bow had been shaped like 2 joined strips of film. Beneath it rested a tintype dated 1903. A young woman stood outside the editing cottage before the false streets had been built. She held a pair of trimming shears in one hand and looked directly into the lens. Her hair, jaw, and uneven eyebrows belonged so closely to Maya's face that Maya lowered the photograph and checked her reflection in the dark cellar window. On the back, written in faded ink, were the words, "Clara Ellison, daughter of Amos Ellison, age 25, summer of 1903. Maya carried the photograph upstairs. The brass key remained on the mantel beside Daniel's medal. She did not know what had opened. Snow retreated from the shaded facades in narrow gray bands. The creek beyond the reservoir grew loud enough to hear from the editing bench, and green catkins opened along the walnut branches. Maya did not begin restoring the nitrate film that spring. The roof had taught her not to confuse urgency with readiness. She chose one worn Morgan dollar from the cash and exchanged it for modern currency. With that money, she bought safety film, fresh cement cotton gloves, and short lengths of damaged stock from an archive supplier. Each afternoon, she practiced 1 cut, 1 scrape, and 1 4-perforation overlap. The failed splices went into the drawer marked "Rejects." The sound ones remained beneath glass. The house was patient, so was she. 2 winters later, on December 18, 2024, Maya completed her first full preservation copy. It was not the legendary reel from the vault. That film remained sealed in cold storage while specialists tested its shrinkage and decomposition. Instead, she restored a 32-foot fragment found in the viewing box, Clara Ellison beside the painted train, raising one hand as steam moved across a canvas sky. Maya cleaned each frame with a soft cloth and approved solvent, repaired 11 torn perforations, and replaced 6 feet of brittle leader. The final splice bent without whitening. When the image passed through the hand-cranked viewer, Clara lifted her hand, vanished into darkness, and lifted it again. Maya ran the copy only once. The restored editing room held no decoration without purpose. Rewinds stood level beneath the north windows. Tools rested in shallow drawers lined with cotton. Ruth's letter remained under archival glass. Elias's knife lay beside Maya's newer blade, both sharpened to the same angle. The original 1788 pane still bent the chapel facade whenever wind moved the walnut trees. White pine floors showed every old walking path beneath their oil. Nothing had been made to look new. It had been made sound. That December, while clearing dead branches near the western walnut, Caleb struck metal beneath the bark with the back of his pruning saw. A brass plate nearly swallowed by the trunk had been fastened there decades earlier. Its center carried a keyhole shaped like a single film perforation. Maya brought the key from the mantel. It turned once. A narrow compartment opened within the tree, protected by a copper sleeve. Inside were oilcloth, a folded 48-star American flag, and a note written by Clara Ellison during the First World War. "Daniel has gone to France," the note began. He asked that this flag remain where the living wood could keep it until someone returned who understood that pictures are also a record of who was absent. Clara wrote that Daniel had carried a portable camera with the 91st Division. He filmed field hospitals, supply roads, and men waiting for letters that arrived already damp. The reels had been sent east after the armistice and lost in government storage. If his medal returns without him, she had written, "Do not make it an ornament. Take it where his name can stand among names that ask for nothing." The note was dated November 11, 1918. On November 11, 2025, Maya carried Daniel's darkened medal to Los Angeles National Cemetery. She placed it beneath his name on the memorial register while the flag moved above rows of white stones. There was no audience beyond a groundskeeper raking leaves near the road. She remained until noon, then took the medal home. The money in the tin box was appraised, documented, and placed in a conservation account under the Ellison estate. Maya used only 4 coins. The first bought the practice materials. The second paid for a temperature-controlled cabinet for the nitrate cans. The third replaced the cracked viewing glass. The fourth purchased acid-free paper film cores and a fire-rated storage chest. She wrapped the remaining coins in their original chamois and returned them to the cedar chamber. On top, she placed a new envelope marked for the next one. The studio did not reopen through an article ceremony or restored marquee. Doris pinned a white index card to the cafe corkboard. Hand film repair, small reels, family pictures, preservation copies. Ask for Maya at the old Ellison lot. The first customer brought a wedding reel stored in a biscuit tin. The second carried 3 minutes of children skating on a frozen pond. Within 6 months, more than 40 names filled Maya's mailing list, though she accepted only what she could repair without hurry. People left their reels at the cafe. Doris placed each one beneath the counter beside the flower invoices. Maya collected them on Tuesdays and returned them when the joins were honest. Caleb came back the following spring in a pickup truck. He had grown broad across the shoulders, but still paused before entering the workroom. In the truck bed lay a hand-carved redwood sign. He had copied the lettering from the faded board above the porch, Ellison and Vale Picture Works. Beneath it, on a separate strip of wood, he had carved, "And daughters." There were more daughters than Vale, he said. Maya ran her thumb across the new letters. Caleb had left the tool marks visible and sealed the wood with linseed oil rather than varnish. They mounted the lower strip before sunset. From the road, the words did not look like a correction. They looked like a line restored to its proper place. That night, Maya opened Ruth's letter again. She placed fresh paper beneath the inspection lamp and began a letter of her own. "My dear one, whoever you are." She wrote that the roof had held through 2 wet seasons, that the chimney drew clean, and that the old nitrate should never be handled alone. She described the temperature cabinet, the account ledger, and which floorboard still clicked beneath the second rewind. She explained that inheritance could arrive without proof of deserving it. The proper answer was not gratitude spoken once, but careful work repeated until another pair of hands could begin safely. At the bottom, she added the date and her full name. Before sealing the envelope, Maya placed Elias's loop beside the page and listened to the repaired windows settle in the evening cold. The film had been waiting for her. She lowered the letter into the cedar chamber and set the envelope for the next one on top of the coins. Then she closed the 3 silent boards and turned the hidden spindle until the seams disappeared. Outside, winter grass moved through the roofless streets. The bank hotel and chapel remained false from behind their braces, plain in the moonlight. Yet the editing house gave off 1 square of amber light steady against the dark ridge. The silent film studio lot waits. It has always waited. In the county records office, Mrs. Evelyn Harrow retired at the end of that year. On her final afternoon, she emptied her brass-stamped drawers of paper clips, pencils, and old parcel cards. At the back of the lowest drawer lay 1 worn dollar from Maya's original payment marked in blue pencil with the date of transfer. Mrs. Harrow left it where it was. Some records, she believed, did not need filing.